Thanks, everyone. Is it possible to get the notes up here? Okay. Well, who's in product leadership here? Quick show of hands. Product leadership, engineering leadership? Okay. Well, I think one of the key skills to develop as product and engineering leader is the ability to anticipate what might be ahead, to recognize incoming changes, and then prepare yourselves and your team to adapt and respond. And our role is quite unique in that there is this constant tension between being aware of the day-to-day changes and also having this responsibility for a longer-term strategic view. And so when I started thinking about reflecting on this and reflecting on my own experience of this, I realized there was a number of techniques and tools that I'd used over the years which helped me stay current and effective as a leader. And that's what I'm excited to share with you today. So my name is James. I'm VP of Engineering at Cint. I've been in engineering leadership now for about 7 years. And just a disclaimer, I'm also getting over a cold, so excuse me if I need to cough. So for this talk, I started thinking about the challenges and the changes that happen as you move from being more hands-on and then you move into leading teams, leading managers, managers of managers. And I realized there was one key skill which really helped me, which was the ability to anticipate change. So I believe that's how you stay current. I believe to stay in the loop and even to stay technical, it's about managing change within our org, within our teams, and even within our roles. So I love this quote. I saw this from Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, a couple of months back on a podcast. Our job as CEOs is to look around corners, anticipate where opportunities will be someday, position the company to be near them, standing under the tree to do a diving catch when the apple falls. I love the idea of the agility here. We had a talk earlier about agile. The idea of positioning the company to be ready to take an opportunity, anticipating future change. So we're going to talk about some tools and techniques we can use to anticipate what might be ahead. Now, when I started working on this talk, eventually the title evolved a little bit. So the talk was actually ended up being called In Anticipation of Change. The publication material was already printed at that point, so I couldn't change it. But that's the underlying idea of this talk, is how do we anticipate change and prepare ourselves to adapt. So we're going to talk about 3 things. One is developing an anticipatory mindset. Then we're going to look at the sources of information we can use to improve our current knowledge. And then finally, we're going to use what I call our leadership stack to help us prepare for change and deal with a situation when our current knowledge is lacking. So first, let's look at developing an anticipatory mindset. First technique we're going to look at is scenario planning. So scenario planning is the process of creating future worlds that could occur based on driving forces we observe today, and then proposing some actions that we could take to our organizations if those scenarios were to materialize. So first, we define some scenarios, and then we use them to discuss and evaluate our current strategies. So this is an exercise that helps you with expansive thinking, helps you to build a mindset of anticipation and preparation for a possible future. So we'll go through an exercise together. The first question we need to ask ourselves is, what are the 2 most critical uncertainties that could change how we run our organization? And we can define these critical uncertainties as driving forces which are both impactful and unpredictable. Essentially, we know they're going to impact our organization, we just don't know exactly how they're going to impact us. So I'm going to select 2 as someone who's in engineering leadership, 2 things which I'm interested in today, and I don't know how they're going to affect my teams and my org. One is AI-assisted engineering, and the other one is software engineering salaries. Maybe these 2 things are related, maybe they interact with each other in interesting ways. So what we'll do for each uncertainty is we'll consider an extreme hypergrowth scenario, and we'll also consider a slow growth scenario, which altogether will give us 4 possible worlds to explore. So what we do is we come up with what is called a scenario matrix. We've got the 2 axes of AI-assisted engineering and salaries on them. And let's start with the bottom left scenario. So scenario number 1 on the blue here, AI-assisted engineering is slow and salaries don't really change. So maybe the signals that we're seeing today, the hype we're seeing, doesn't really materialize into anything significant. It sort of goes away. So scenario number 2 on the red side here, we've got AI-assisted engineering is still slow, but for some reason we see an increase in engineering salaries. And we don't necessarily know what might cause this, but that's a scenario we might want to explore. And then number 3 in the top left, we've got significant adoption and growth of AI-assisted engineering, but we don't see a significant change to engineering salaries. So maybe in this world, AI-assisted engineering creates a more accessible world for people who want to join software development. We have far more engineers, increasing supply, that maybe affects the way salaries change. And then finally, scenario number 4, we see massive growth of AI-assisted engineering, and we also see salaries change. And maybe in this world, we have, the ability to produce far higher quality products at a faster rate, which impacts product profitability, and that impacts salaries as well. So the point of this scenario matrix is to discuss with your team these future worlds, and then to decide what are the strategies we're doing today, and how are they impacted by these potential scenarios. So we can ask questions like, what is the likelihood of a given scenario occurring, and what's the impact of that scenario going to be? You can imagine assigning a prioritized list of the most critical scenarios that you want to work through. You can also evaluate your current product and engineering strategies in light of these scenarios. So you can say, what are we doing today that would actually work well in all of these scenarios? What are we doing that would fail in any one of these scenarios? And so we can also look at our options. What options do we have in the anticipation of a highly likely and highly impactful scenario? So the combination of a scenario matrix and some good questions can help you prepare and lead with a bit more confidence, preparing for possible future changes. So as we continue to think about developing an anticipatory mindset, we need to accept the fact that technology is always changing. And that change sometimes is initiated by external forces, but it's also sometimes comes from within our organization. And one of the ways to manage and communicate the inevitable changes effectively within your org is to build a technology radar. So this was originally developed by ThoughtWorks, and it's great to review their guide. They publish it twice a year, but they also strongly advocate that you build your own. And building your own will help you and your teams to discuss new trends, to signal which tools and techniques we want to deprecate, and then it will give you a chance to basically prepare your technical strategy as well. So let's take a closer look at this. This is a quick guide to how the radar works. We have the visual radar metaphor here, and then the quadrants which represent techniques, tools, platforms, languages, and frameworks. And then starting with the outer rings, we've got hold, which basically means this is a technology that we're phasing out. We don't want to use it. And then we've got assess, which means it's worth some research. Try it out, give us some feedback. And then we've got trial, which means it's gone past that initial assessment. It's now ready to be used, maybe on a non-critical project, but it needs a real-world test. And then adopt, which means this has gone through a ton of testing, should be now adopted for use. And so you can see these blips on the radar. These represent maybe a technique or a tool or a language or a framework. And so one of the reasons for doing this is that your role as an engineering leader and possibly a product leader as well is to develop and communicate our technical strategy. This means mapping out where we are today, where we want to go, and how do we get there. And so you can use the process of developing a technology radar to bring your team together and to build your technology strategy. And by bringing people together, hopefully it becomes something that many people can feel some ownership and responsibility for. And an easy way to start is by asking your function leaders to just document what are they doing today, what are the tools, techniques that they're currently using, what are the things they're interested in trying out, what are the things they want to deprecate. And so this can lead to some really good discussions about the current technical strategy. A good example is maybe there are some contradictory choices. Maybe there are some missing implicit choices that need to be made more explicit. It can also highlight some failed initiatives. Maybe there's a technology that's been on hold for years, but maybe it's still running in production, it's still responsible for a significant percentage of revenue, It might highlight some organizational characteristics. Maybe we find it hard to deprecate technologies, or we're not able to adopt new software quickly enough. And it's also great for new starters. It helps to communicate things which can be sometimes institutionalized knowledge. So developing a radar like this can be the driver of a lot of good discussions and helps you as an engineering leader prepare your team and develop a technical strategy for the future. So next we're going to think about knowledge gathering. This is going to help us more in the short term to build our mental model of our organization, to develop our intuition and our decision making. Any Olympiacos fans in here? Today I'm an Olympiacos fan. Kudos to the team for winning yesterday. But if we look at elite footballers, one of the things you'll observe, if you watch them, especially the players who don't have the ball, they're constantly swiveling their head. They're scanning, they're looking for spaces, they're looking at opportunities. Where is my next best move? Where are there going to be threats? Basically building their mental model of the game, increasing their awareness of the best options. And all of this is so that when they do get the ball, when they do need to make a decision, they're more likely to make a decision with a high degree of success. So taking this analogy into engineering leadership, one of the ways I've prepared myself for the future and build my intuition and my decision-making skills is asking what I call scanning questions. And these are questions which build up my understanding of the areas I need to be up to date on. Questions focus on 3 areas: company knowledge, industry knowledge, and opportunistic knowledge. And the purpose of these questions is to give you something to deep dive into, to go beyond the obvious answer and to do some investigation. So I'm going to whiz through these because running out of time. But starting with company knowledge, you can ask questions like, how does the company make money? How does the company spend money? What languages, systems are we using? You can maybe look at your tech radar for that sort of question. What are the long-standing challenges that we need to address? How do our teams collaborate, decide, debate, and deliver software? Moving on to industry knowledge, one of the goals of this whole exercise is to help you as a leader avoid the tunnel vision that comes with being busy managing teams. Often you can get stuck in the details, you lose the ability to see the broader perspective, you get into your own bubble, and you forget that technology is always changing. So we can use some industry scanning questions to help us stay current. Starting with the obvious question, why does this industry even exist? What problem is it here to solve? If you consider your customers are always looking to do more for less, improve their ROI, then perhaps the problem your product solves today will be solved in an entirely new way with future technologies. We can think about our competitors and how they differentiate. How might someone create a game-changing, disruptive product in this industry? It's a great question to ask. Who are your ideal customers? Who are your actual customers? How much do those two overlap? All of these questions help you get a better feel for your organization's role within the industry and understand the competitive pressures and some of the driving forces that might impact your organization and the decisions you need to make. And finally, opportunistic knowledge. This is all about absorbing information, staying curious, putting yourself into a situation where you'll learn new things. So I think this also includes creating a safe space for your team. I wonder how many really good ideas are sitting within your teams, but which are not shared because people are worried about sounding too ridiculous or sounding idealist. So if you can tap into your own team and enable them to share their ideas, you may learn a whole bunch of really interesting things. You can think about what technologies are undervalued or underutilized, taking a look at your vendor list or your tech stack and see what can we do better with what we already have. Learning from adjacent industries is something I particularly like doing. If you're in software engineering, you can learn a lot by looking at industrial design or the automotive industry. You may discover a way that they're solving a problem that could impact and influence the way you're working. And then finally, looking at changes in attitudes towards new technology. There could be techniques we couldn't use a year ago, which are now broadly accepted and much more feasible. So these sets of sources we can use for scanning to help us with our decision-making and building our intuition. And then finally, we're going to look at the leadership stack, and this is going to give us a fallback mechanism for when we're going through a period of change. So this is basically similar to the idea of a tech stack, but the idea is that it helps us in 2 ways. Firstly, it gives us a way to prepare for change ahead of time. And then secondly, it helps us stay effective as we're going through a period of transition. So the first way is about our self-awareness. preparing for change ahead of time, the skills that we need to develop. And then the second way is about our situational awareness, understanding change. When we're going through a change, how do we manage that transition? So a good example, if you're assigned a new team or you need to develop a new product or a new role, sometimes these major changes come with the realization that our skill sets have a gap that we now need to meet. And so we can use this leadership stack as a way to help us through that period. So there are 4 areas, 4 focus areas and the skills and competencies. So level 1 of the stack represents people skills. And this is all about having good one-to-ones, performance management, decision-making, giving good feedback and coaching. Lots of skills here that focus on understanding and working with people. Level 2 represents project management skills, about setting goals, understanding team dynamics, dealing with dependencies, bottlenecks, and timelines. 2 of my favorite books here are the Gene Kim books, the Phoenix Project and the Unicorn Project, all about people working together to try and achieve a goal. Level 3 represents software engineering. So for me, I'm an engineer, so things like distributed systems, testing architectures, all those sorts of skills are important to stay on top of. And then finally, level 4 represents company goals. So how do you align your teams to work towards the goals set by the leadership team, thinking about driving product adoption, communicating the technical strategy, understanding the costs and the business metrics. So this is useful in 2 ways. Firstly, just having this mental model, having things written down gives you a way to understand where you need to develop your skills. You may be asking yourself, how do I develop myself as a leader? These focus areas are a good place to start. You may find that you need to improve your coaching skills, or you may need to improve your ability to facilitate decision-making, or you may need to understand how a Kubernetes cluster works. But over time, you can add to these skills boxes as you see fit. But all of this prepares you for future change. And then secondly, by having this laid out, you can prepare yourself for the moment where you're going through a transition. And usually in that time, you can focus your time and your efforts on a part of the stack that will help keep you effective. So you can imagine the process of going through a reorg. You're now responsible for a new team or a new line of business. For me, during that time, the first thing I do is I think about who am I managing? Who are the people I'm now responsible for? Who are my go-to leaders? Who are my subject matter experts that I need to spend some time with? And then I think about what are they doing? What are they building? What problems are they solving? What risks are they dealing with? And then I think about how are they doing it? What tools are they using? How are they deploying? How are they monitoring the applications? How are they dealing with complexity? And then finally, I think about why. Why are they building it? What problems are they trying to solve? How does it drive growth? How does it add value to our customers? And so this second way that it helps is that in that moment of change, it can give you a way to work your way from lacking knowledge to attaining knowledge, making sure you don't forget those key steps along the way. So for me, always going back to focusing on the people first is really important because it helps you establish trust and build connections and communicate your intentions. And I think a lot of what you need to do after that depends on having that foundation. So bringing it all together, as we think about getting back in the loop and anticipating change, we've got our leadership stack, which gives us the 4 focus areas and skills to develop so we can prepare for change and make transitions well. Our scanning questions help us build a mental model of our company, of our industry, develop our intuition and our decision-making. We've then got the technology radar, which we can use to have a conversation with our team, to build our technical strategy, to document the choices we want to make today and into the future, and then prepare our organization for change. And then finally, we've got scenario planning, which allows us to imagine future worlds and prepare our organization for future change. And with that, I hope you have some tools and techniques you can use to stay current and effective as a leader. Thank you for listening.